So now you know the trap. You know how it is set. You know how it feels when you fall into it. You know the exhaustion, the frustration, the maddening experience of trying to pour sense into a vessel that has no intention of holding it. But knowing the trap is only half the work. The other half, the more important half, is knowing what to do instead. Because here is what nobody tells you when they say, "Don't argue with fools." They never tell you what to do with your hands. What to do with the anger that rises in your chest when the provocation lands. What to do with the truth you are holding that nobody in the room seems to want. What to do with yourself, your dignity, your energy, your presence, in a moment that is pushing hard for your reaction. That is what part 2 is about. Not just the don't. But the powerful, practical, stoically grounded do instead. Let's go. The power of disengagement. Let me tell you about a chess grandmaster named Victor. Victor had been playing chess since he was 6 years old. By his 30s, he had competed at the highest levels of international competition. He understood the game, not just technically, but psychologically, in ways that most players never reach. And Victor had a rule. Whenever an opponent tried to get into his head, through taunting, through deliberate delays, through provocative body language designed to rattle his composure, Victor did something that baffled younger players who watched him. He slowed down. Not because he was confused. Not because he was rattled. But because he had learned, through decades of high-stakes competition, that the player who controls the pace of the game controls the game itself. He would lean back. Take a breath. Look at the board, not at his opponent. And he would ask himself one quiet, clarifying question. What does the board actually require right now? Not what his emotions required. Not what his ego demanded. Not what the audience expected. What the board required. And then he would make the move that served the game, not the move that responded to the provocation. Victor won more often than almost anyone in his generation. Not because he was the most technically gifted. But because he refused to play 2 games at once. This is the first strategy of the wise person in the face of foolish argument. Disengage from the emotion. Engage with the reality. Ask yourself, not what your anger wants to do, not what your pride is demanding, but what the situation actually requires. What response, or non-response, will serve your actual long-term interests? 9 times out of 10, the board does not require you to argue. It requires you to move wisely and let your opponent exhaust themselves. Strategy 1, the graceful exit. The most underrated skill in human communication is knowing how to leave a conversation. Not storming out. Not shutting down. Not going cold and passive-aggressive in a way that creates more drama than the argument itself. I mean a graceful exit. A clean, dignified, unapologetic withdrawal from an exchange that has no productive destination. It sounds like this. I hear you. I don't think we're going to reach an agreement today, and that's okay. Or simply, I'm going to step away from this conversation. And then, and this is the critical part, you actually do it. No final point. No parting shot. No last word designed to land like a grenade as you walk away. Just the exit. Clean. Complete. Yours. Let me tell you why this is so powerful. The foolish arguer feeds on engagement. Every response you give, even a calm, logical, perfectly constructed response, is fuel. It signals that you are still in the game. That you can still be moved. That there is still something to be extracted from this exchange. The graceful exit cuts the fuel line. And it does something else that most people don't anticipate. It signals, quietly, unmistakably, without a single aggressive word, that you are not available for this. That your time and energy operate at a standard this conversation has not met. That you have somewhere more important to be. Which you always do. That somewhere is your own peace. Short story, The Empty Boat. There is an ancient Chinese parable that I return to often, because it captures something that volumes of philosophy sometimes struggle to express. A man was rowing his boat across a river in the early morning fog. Out of nowhere, another boat came crashing into his, hard, jarring, sending him stumbling across his own vessel. He leapt to his feet, furious. He opened his mouth to unleash his anger at the careless, reckless, inconsiderate fool who had crashed into him. And then the fog cleared slightly. And he saw that the other boat was empty. No one was in it. It had simply drifted loose from its mooring and floated into his path. And just like that, his anger dissolved. Because you cannot be angry at an empty boat. There is no one to blame. No intention to punish. No ego to confront. The boat simply was what it was, adrift, directionless, moved entirely by forces outside itself. Now here is the question the parable is really asking. What if you treated every provocateur the same way? What if, the next time someone crashed into your peace, your logic, your dignity, you looked past the noise and recognized the empty boat? Not a malicious genius plotting your downfall. Not a worthy intellectual opponent deserving your full engagement. Just a person adrift. Moved by their own insecurities, their own wounds, their own unexamined fears, with no real captain at the helm. You cannot win an argument against an empty boat. But you can row around it. And keep going. Strategy 2, agreement without surrender. This one is subtle. And it is one of the most powerful tools in the arsenal of anyone who has mastered the art of non-argument. It is called agreement without surrender. And it works like this. When a foolish person makes a statement that is wrong, provocative, or designed to draw you into conflict, instead of correcting them directly, instead of presenting your counter-evidence, instead of doing the thing every instinct in your body is screaming at you to do, you agree with the part you can agree with. And you say nothing about the rest. It sounds like this. You might be right. I can see why you'd feel that way. That's an interesting perspective. Now, before you recoil and say, but that's dishonest. That's capitulation. That's letting them win. Let me explain what is actually happening beneath the surface of these responses. You are not agreeing with their position. You are agreeing with their right to hold it. There is a profound difference. You might be right does not mean you are right. It means, I am not going to exhaust myself trying to change your mind today. I can see why you'd feel that way does not mean I share your feeling. It means, I acknowledge your humanity without endorsing your conclusion. These responses do something strategically brilliant. They remove the resistance that the argument feeds on. An argument is like arm wrestling. It requires two people pushing against each other with equivalent force. The moment one person relaxes their arm, the dynamic collapses. There is nothing left to push against. Agreement without surrender is the art of relaxing your arm, without falling. You don't lose your position. You simply stop making your position available as a target. Short story, The Willow and the Oak. There is a reason the willow tree has survived storms that have toppled ancient oaks. It is not because the willow is stronger. The oak, by every measurable standard, is stronger. Its trunk is harder. Its wood is denser. Its root system is more impressive to look at. But in a storm, the oak resists. Every gust of wind is met with the full force of the oak's rigidity. It does not bend. It does not yield. It stands firm, proud, unyielding, magnificent. Until the wind is stronger than the oak. And then it breaks. The willow does something different. The willow bends, dramatically, almost alarmingly, in every direction the wind demands. It looks, in the middle of the storm, like it cannot possibly survive. Like it is being defeated in real time. And then the storm passes. And the willow straightens. Unbothered. Unbroken. Exactly where it was before the storm arrived. The wise person in an argument is the willow. They bend without breaking. They yield without surrendering. They absorb the force of the storm without making it a battle of resistance. And when the fool has exhausted themselves, when the wind has blown itself out, the wise person is still standing. Still rooted. Still exactly who they were before the argument began. Be the willow. Strategy 3, let your results speak. There is an old expression that I believe with my entire being. Never explain yourself to foolish people. Your results will do it for you. Here is the hardest truth in this entire conversation. Some people are never going to be convinced by your words. Not because your words are wrong, but because their investment in your being wrong is greater than their interest in the truth. These people have decided, consciously or not, that your failure serves them. That your being confused, lost, small, or uncertain makes them feel better about their own confusion, their own lostness, their own smallness. And no argument you present, however airtight, however beautifully constructed, is going to dismantle that investment. The only thing that dismantles it is time. And results. Let me tell you about a woman named Priscilla. Priscilla had a business idea. A real one, thought through, researched, built on a solid foundation. And she had a brother-in-law named Dennis who had a loud opinion about everything and expertise in almost nothing. Dennis told her the idea was foolish. He said it publicly, repeatedly, and with the full confidence of someone who had never built anything in his life. Priscilla had two choices. She could argue with Dennis. Defend her research. Present her projections. Try to convince him, meeting after meeting, dinner after dinner, that he was wrong. Or she could build the business. She chose to build the business. 3 years later, Priscilla's business was thriving. And at a family gathering, she overheard Dennis telling someone that he had always believed in her idea. He had rewritten history, because results had made the argument irrelevant. She smiled. Said nothing. Because nothing needed to be said. Your results are the argument that foolish people cannot counter. Your growth is the point they cannot refute. Your peace, your quiet, unshakable, hard-won peace, is the most devastating response to everyone who ever bet against you. Work in silence. Let the results be loud. Protecting your peace, the ultimate strategy. Everything we have discussed today, every story, every principle, every stoic insight, comes back to one thing. Peace. Not the peace of someone who has never been challenged. Not the naive peace of someone who has never encountered difficulty. But the deep, rooted, earned peace of someone who has been challenged, repeatedly, personally, loudly, and has chosen, every single time, to protect what is inside them over winning what is outside them. This peace is not given to you. It is built. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Silence by silence. Every time you decline an argument you didn't need to have, you lay a brick. Every time you choose the graceful exit over the satisfying last word, you lay a brick. Every time you let your results speak instead of your defensiveness, you lay a brick. Every time you see the empty boat and choose to row around it, you lay a brick. And over time, brick by brick, choice by choice, you build something that no foolish argument can touch. A life of such clarity, such intention, such groundedness, that the provocations that used to consume you start to look exactly like what they always were. Small. Temporary. Someone else's storm. Marcus Aurelius wrote, and this is perhaps my favorite line in all of Stoic literature, he wrote, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are. Keep an untroubled spirit. That is the practice. That is the destination. That is the life that becomes available to you when you master the art of never arguing with people who have no use for truth. Not a life without conflict. But a life in which conflict cannot find a home inside you. A life in which the fool's fire has no fuel, because you have become, quietly and completely, fireproof." Short story, the final story, the teacup. A student once came to a wise teacher, frustrated and agitated. He had been in an argument all day, with a colleague, with a neighbor, with a stranger online. He had been right in every single exchange. He had the facts. He had the logic. He had dismantled every counter-argument with precision. And yet he felt terrible. Hollow. Drained. Somehow smaller than when the day began. He sat down across from the teacher and said, "I won every argument today. So why do I feel like I lost?" The teacher said nothing. He simply reached for the teapot and began pouring tea into the student's cup. He poured until the cup was full. And then he kept pouring. Tea spilled over the rim. Across the table. Onto the floor. "Stop," the student said. "The cup is full. It cannot hold any more." The teacher set down the teapot. "You," he said quietly, "are like this cup. So full of the need to be right, so full of argument, of proof, of the hunger to win, that nothing new can enter. No peace. No wisdom. No rest." He looked at the student steadily. "Empty the cup. Only then can something worth having fill it." The student sat in silence for a long time. And for the first time all day, he felt like he had actually won something. Closing, the charge. We have walked a long road together in this conversation. We have seen Gerald lose the war while winning every exchange. We have seen Victor control the game by refusing to play two at once. We have watched Priscilla let her results silence the loudest critic in the room. We have seen the willow survive what broke the oak. We have learned to recognize the empty boat, and choose to row around it. And we have arrived at the only conclusion that matters. The wisest thing you will ever do in the face of foolishness, is protect your peace. Not your reputation. Your peace. Not your pride. Your peace. Not your need to be understood by people who are not ready to understand. Your peace. Because your peace is the house everything else lives in. Your creativity, your relationships, your health, your joy, your ability to build something real and lasting in this world, all of it lives inside the house of your peace. Guard it like it is the most valuable thing you own. Because it is. If this conversation has shifted something in you, if you are leaving here with even one idea that will change how you respond the next time a fool extends an invitation to chaos, then you already know that this channel is different. So if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications. Join a community of people who are serious about living with intention, with wisdom, and with the kind of unshakable inner peace that no argument, no fool, and no storm can reach. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who has been losing sleep over an argument that was never worth having. Someone who has been pouring their best energy into convincing people who were never listening. Send it to them. It might be the most important thing they hear today. This is the Stoic path. Walk it with intention. And never, never, give your peace away to someone who doesn't even know what it's worth. I'll see you in the next chapter. What if the moment you opened your mouth to win the argument, you had already lost? What if the smartest thing you could ever say is nothing at all? And what if the person you have been trying to convince was never actually listening? Stay with me. Because what I am about to share with you will change the way you respond to people, forever. Intro. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. It is the exhaustion that comes after an argument. Not just any argument, but the specific, draining, soul-depleting kind that you somehow knew, even before it started, was never going to go anywhere. You know the feeling. You walked in with logic. With facts. With calm, reasonable, well-constructed points. And you walked out 2 hours later feeling like you had been running in circles inside a burning building, breathless, singed, and no closer to the exit than when you entered. And the worst part? The other person walked away completely unbothered. Completely unchanged. Maybe even more convinced of their original position than before you opened your mouth. That feeling, that specific, maddening, energy-draining feeling, is what today's conversation is about. Because here on the Stoic path, we believe that intelligence is not just about what you know. It is about knowing when to speak, and more powerfully, when to be absolutely, strategically, magnificently silent. Let's get into it. The trap of the argument. Let me tell you about a man named Gerald. Gerald was brilliant. Genuinely brilliant. The kind of man who read widely, thought deeply, and could construct an argument the way a master architect constructs a building: solid foundation, clean lines, nothing out of place. And Gerald had a colleague. Let's call him Raymond. Raymond was the kind of person who had an opinion about everything and knowledge about very little. The kind of person who spoke loudly, confidently, and completely without evidence. The kind of person who, when presented with facts, simply raised his voice and repeated himself. One day, in a staff meeting, Raymond made a claim that was not just wrong, it was embarrassingly, demonstrably, provably wrong. And Gerald, brilliant, well-read, masterfully articulate Gerald, decided to correct him. He presented the facts. Calmly. Clearly. With evidence. Raymond disagreed. Gerald presented more facts. Raymond disagreed louder. Gerald brought documentation. Raymond questioned the documentation. 45 minutes later, 45 minutes of the entire team's time, energy, and attention, Raymond walked out of that meeting still believing exactly what he had believed when he walked in. And Gerald walked out exhausted, frustrated, and somehow, in the eyes of several colleagues, looking like the difficult one. Gerald had won every single exchange. And lost the entire war. Because Gerald had fallen into the oldest trap in human interaction. He had tried to use reason, on someone who had no use for it. The anatomy of a foolish argument. Now, I want to be careful here. Because when I say foolish people, I am not talking about people who are less educated. I am not talking about people who disagree with you politically or philosophically. I am not talking about people who simply see the world differently. Intelligence has nothing to do with academic credentials. And disagreement, genuine, honest, thoughtful disagreement, is one of the most valuable things that can happen in a conversation. When I say foolish people, I mean something very specific. I mean people who are not in the conversation to find truth. They are in the conversation to win. To dominate. To be seen. To protect an ego that is far too fragile to survive the experience of being wrong. You can identify them quickly. They share certain characteristics. They never ask questions, they only make statements. They never update their position, no matter what evidence is presented. They get louder when they run out of logic. They make the conversation about you the moment they start losing on the issue. And they walk away from every exchange, no matter how definitively they were dismantled, completely certain they were right. These are not people engaged in dialogue. These are people engaged in performance. And here is the devastating truth that most of us learn far too late. You cannot win a performance with logic. Because a performance is not about truth. It is about audience. It is about identity. It is about the story someone is telling themselves, and needs to keep telling themselves, in order to remain who they believe they are. When you argue with a foolish person, you are not entering a debate. You are walking onto their stage. And on their stage, they make the rules. What the wise already know. Mark Twain, one of the sharpest minds in American literary history, said something that I want you to write down, tattoo on your brain, and recall every single time you feel the urge to correct someone who has no interest in being corrected. He said, "Never argue with a fool. Onlookers may not be able to tell the difference." Read that again. Onlookers may not be able to tell the difference. This is not just wit. This is warfare strategy wrapped in a wisecrack. Because Twain understood something that most people miss entirely, the moment you step into an argument with a foolish person, you have lowered yourself to the terrain of that argument. And on that terrain, you look exactly like what you are fighting. Two people yelling. Two people not listening. Two people more invested in being right than in being wise. From the outside, no one can tell which one is the brilliant, reasonable, well-intentioned person, and which one is the fool. The Stoic philosophers understood this centuries before Twain put it so memorably. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of the greatest minds of the ancient world, taught his students that the truly wise person is distinguished not by how well they argue, but by how rarely they need to. He said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." In other words, stop trying to rearrange the world to match your logic. Some things, some people, some situations, are exactly what they are. And wisdom is knowing which battles are worth your energy, and which ones will only drain you of the peace you have worked so hard to cultivate. Short story, The Mud Fight. There is an old expression, and I love it because it is so viscerally, perfectly true. Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. Let me bring that to life. Imagine two people standing at the edge of a mud pit. One of them, the foolish one, jumps in without hesitation. Starts splashing. Starts calling out. "Come on in. Come in and fight me. Prove I'm wrong. Come on." And the wise person stands at the edge, watching. Every instinct says to jump in. The invitation is loud. The accusation is personal. The audience is watching. Every nerve in the body is firing. Defend yourself. Prove them wrong. Don't let them get away with this. But the wise person has learned something the foolish one never will. The mud does not care who is right. If you jump in, you are muddy. Full stop. It doesn't matter that you were provoked. It doesn't matter that you were right. It doesn't matter that your form was better and your argument was cleaner and your facts were more accurate. You are standing in mud, next to a pig, and nobody watching can see the difference. The wise person steps back from the edge. Not because they are afraid. Not because they have no argument. Not because the foolish person has won. But because they understand something the foolish person cannot comprehend. Staying clean is the victory. The energy economy of arguing. I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in conversations about conflict and communication. Energy. Your mental, emotional, and spiritual energy is not unlimited. It is a finite, precious, irreplaceable resource. And every argument you enter, every back and forth, every raised voice, every circular exchange with someone who is not listening, costs you something real. Think of your daily energy as a bank account. Every morning you wake up with a certain deposit. Not unlimited, a specific amount. And every decision you make, every interaction you engage in, every emotional response you generate, withdraws from that account. Now, here is the question I want you to sit with. Is an argument with a foolish person a worthy investment of your daily deposit? Is the temporary satisfaction of being right, of landing a point, of watching someone stumble over their own contradiction, is that worth the withdrawal? Worth the elevated cortisol? Worth the hours of mental replay afterward, running the argument on a loop, thinking of all the things you should have said? The Stoics called this selective engagement, the deliberate, philosophical choice of where to direct one's attention and energy. Marcus Aurelius, who governed the most powerful empire in the world, who faced critics, enemies, manipulators, and fools in every direction, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was not writing for public applause. He was writing for himself. Reminding himself, the most powerful man in the world, that the greatest power available to him was the power to choose his response. Not to every enemy. Not to every critic. Not to every fool who wanted a piece of his attention. Only to what was worthy of it. You have the same power. The question is whether you are using it. Short story, The Monk and the Insult. There is a story told about a Zen monk who was walking through a village when a man ran up to him and began shouting insults. Terrible things. Personal things. Things designed to provoke, to humiliate, to draw a reaction. The monk stood quietly and listened until the man was finished. Then he smiled, bowed gently, and continued walking. A student who had witnessed the exchange ran to catch up with him. "Master," the student asked, breathless, "how did you do that? How did you stand there and take that without responding? Without defending yourself? Didn't it make you angry?" The monk considered the question for a moment. Then he said, "If someone offers you a gift, and you decline to receive it, to whom does the gift belong?" The student thought. "To the person who offered it, I suppose." The monk nodded. So it is with insults. With provocations. With arguments offered in bad faith. If I choose not to receive them, they remain entirely with the one who brought them. He paused. His anger is his burden. Not mine. And he kept walking. This is the Stoic principle in its most elegant form. You are not required to accept everything that is offered to you. Not every insult. Not every accusation. Not every invitation to argue. You get to decide what you receive, and what you allow to pass by you like weather. The fool is always offering a gift you didn't ask for. You are always allowed to decline. The silence that speaks volumes. There is a kind of silence that is weakness. The silence of someone who has something to say but is too afraid to say it. The silence of self-abandonment and suppressed truth. That is not the silence I am talking about. The silence I am talking about is something else entirely. It is the silence of someone who has assessed the situation, clearly, quickly, without ego, and determined that no words from them will improve it. That the wisest response is to offer nothing. To deny the argument the oxygen it needs to grow. This silence is not passive. It is perhaps the most active, disciplined, demanding thing a human being can do in the heat of a moment that is screaming for reaction. Think about what it requires. It requires you to feel the pull of the argument, and resist it. It requires you to hear the provocation, and not take the bait. It requires you to know you are right, and be willing to let the moment pass without proving it. That is not weakness. That is extraordinary strength. Teddy Roosevelt, a man nobody would ever accuse of being timid, had a saying he kept close: speak softly and carry a big stick. The big stick is your intelligence. Your capability. Your truth. Your actual power in the situation. The speaking softly, or not speaking at all, is the wisdom to know that power announced is power diminished. That the person who feels the need to prove themselves in every exchange is the person most afraid they have nothing to prove. The truly powerful don't need the argument. They already know what they know. And that knowing, that quiet, rooted, unshakable knowing, is worth more than winning every argument you will ever. We have seen, through Gerald's story, how brilliance can be completely neutralized by the wrong opponent. We have learned to identify the characteristics of a foolish argument, and the person behind it. We have borrowed wisdom from Twain, from Epictetus, from Marcus Aurelius, from the Zen monk who understood that an insult unaccepted returns to its sender. And we have begun to understand that silence, real, deliberate, philosophically grounded silence, is not the absence of power. It is power in its most refined form. But we are only halfway through.